Welcome back to Clearwater Jazz Holidays, Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions. Alejandro Arenas, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
We are so excited to have Alejandro back with us on a topic today we are calling Fun with Arranging, Reimagining Existing Composition. Participants are muted for the courtesy of the session, but if there are questions, we'll get those to Alejandro. We love your feedback. info@clearwaterjazz.com, and check out all our online resources, including the studio, where we archive all these past sessions after today. This one will be up there. And the Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions podcast. There's about 80 or so plus segments up there, including our Stop Time series with Frank Williams, which is a historical, pretty comprehensive history of jazz through time, told in Frank's one-of-a-kind style. So check out that on the podcast. And those resources are brought to you by Blue Water Wealth Management at Steward Partners and Marine Max Clearwater. Thank you for that great support. Big shout out too to the Al Downing Tampa Bay Jazz Association for helping with these sessions. And we are going to get right into it with Alejandro. Alejandro has done several past sessions with us. Check out in the studio Bass Styles series, an approach to playing swing, funk, and more, an approach to playing Brazilian and Latin grooves, bass sound from pickup and amps to technique and more, history of the rhythm section, harmony, a bass perspective, and his last session, musical composition, approaches and ideas. All wonderful, really great sessions. Alejandro was born in Colombia, where he started his musical career playing flamenco and classical guitar. He picked up the bass while he attended college in Bogota, where he performed in the salsa and Andean music ensembles as well as the school's orchestra. During his high school years, he performed with different independent bands and styles ranging from salsa, blues, rock, heavy metal, and everything in between. Upon graduating high school, he moved to Gainesville, Florida, where he worked as a freelance musician while being exposed to different genres such as reggae, jazz, and funk. He earned an AA in music studies from Santa Fe Community College, where he worked unpacking books in the morning, studying during the day, and playing gigs by night. In the midst of this chaotic time in his life, he developed a deep love and passion for jazz, which drove him to play the upright bass. He holds a Bachelor's of Music in Jazz Performance and a Master's of Music from the University of South Florida. During his studies at USF, he toured Italy, France, and Germany with the Jazz Ensemble One and the Jazz Tet, performing at different jazz festivals. In addition to being an adjunct professor for the MIRA program at St. Petersburg College, Alejandro is very active as a versatile performer, working with many artists. He also co-leads the award-winning group La Lucha, who, by the way, has a new album out, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, which has had wonderful success on the charts and is a phenomenal album. So please check that out wherever you stream your music. And lastly, Alejandro has been a regular part of these virtual sessions, but also our Young Lions program in the traditional sense. We have an event in December of every year at Ruth Eckerd Hall, our wonderful partner, and we invite lots of schools to participate in that, and Alejandro has been an active participant in that, as well as when we go into the schools with school visits. So Alejandro, thank you for being a special part of our outreach. Welcome back to these virtual sessions. The stage is all yours.
Thank you, Steve. Always glad to be back, of course, and talk about things that I love, but this is what today's topic is actually one of my favorite ones, which is arranging. And arranging is kind of really a way that music has stayed fresh. I think I mentioned in one of my past sessions that, specifically in jazz, we keep kind of reinventing all these standards that have been around for a long time. So arranging them is a way to really differentiate yourself from other musicians that may be playing the same song. So arranging can be, it's subjective, just like composition. What makes a good arrangement, what makes a bad arrangement, that's all really for the listener to decide. But what I want to talk about is a little bit of how I approach arranging from my own perspective. I kind of have as Steve mentioned on my bio, have a kind of a little bit of a self-taught background, but also, I went through college, got my bachelor's and master's in music. But before that, I was pretty much self-taught. So one of the driving things for me to play music was always write original music, but also to make original arrangements. I didn't particularly like doing just a note for note cover of a specific song. I always kind of liked the idea of making it my own, and arranging is a great way to do that, to get an existing composition and make it your own. So I'm going to talk about a few different things, but one rule that I try to adhere to is to kind of keep the melody as intact as I can, as the composer intended it to be. Now, what does that exactly mean? Because singers actually, when they interpret a melody, they don't always stick to a melody verbatim. Ella Fitzgerald famously would sing the first A section of a song a certain way, like kind of pretty straightforward the way it was written, then take a little bit of liberties as she went through the song. And a lot of singers do this, But, from a singer's perspective, you're also singing lyrics. So the song is not only recognizable by the melody, but also by the lyrics. So that changes once you're trying to arrange something for an instrumentalist. So that's where I try to kind of find how the melody sounds in its purest form and try to stick to that. Now, that doesn't mean that the melody is not going to change. So there's a couple of different ways that the melody can change, which I'll talk about in a second. But actually, thinking about that from the perspective, even the same, I'll use an example that's interesting. The Girl from Ipanema, the original, it's not the original recording, but the most famous recording, which was Joel Gilberto with Stan Getz and Antonio Carlos Jobim. And there's two versions of that song. And actually, I think both, if I recall, there's a Portuguese verse and there's a Portuguese lyric and an American lyric within the same recording. But in any case, there's the English version, which Astrud Gilberto, Joe's wife at that time, sang. And then Joe Gilberto did, the Portuguese version. And within the first line, there's already a difference in the melody in terms of the number of syllables that they use because of the different languages. So, the American way is ba, so tall and young, da 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 da. Right? Sorry, I don't remember the lyrics exactly, and you don't want to hear me sing for longer than that. But in Portuguese, there's hola, qué cosa más linda, más llena de gracia. So you have like pa 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 pa. And the Portuguese is ba ba da 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 da, loosely around that. So there's already a significant difference there in terms of the number of syllables being used. However, the melody still sounds the same because the essence of the melody is there, meaning the shape and contour and how you reach the notes and all of that. It is there. So it is recognizable as being the same song, just sung in a different language. So that is something that I try to adhere to when, if you're arranging a song that has lyrics to do an instrumental version, that's a place where you can take some liberties starting with. So you don't always have to be. Sometimes certain repeated lyrics, that's why I like songs that are kind of based on like a hip hop melody or something like that are kind of hard to arrange for an instrumental. Not hard, but to me, not as much fun because you have a lot of repeated notes. Unless it's a very interesting rhythm, it can sound very rhythmic, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just a challenge. If you want to adhere to to some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. So, first thing that the easiest thing that you can change, or the easiest way to give a song a different sound, is changing the harmony, which is what jazz musicians tend to jump onto first, or maybe that's a vast generalization, but that's kind of a good way to change things. So I want to use an example of a very simple melody. This is not a jazz melody. This is actually a pop melody, and it's Paparazzi by Lady Gaga. I actually did an arrangement of this song on one of our La Lucha records. But the melody at the beginning, the verse, is fairly simple. It's just two notes. I'm going to try to play them here on the keyboard a little bit. So up to there, it's a very repeated melody, right? Right? It's a fairly simple melody. So a good way to kind of make that more interesting is by, like I mentioned, changing the harmony. But basically, that melody just sits over a C minor chord. Oops, sorry, that's not what a C minor chord sounds like. Up to there is just one chord. So one way that I found, one way that I like to work, and I actually went over this on my composition masterclass. It's the same approach. If I have an existing melody that even I wrote, I still go through this process sometimes of trying to find interesting ways to harmonize it. So I go just play left hand bass. I'm not a keyboard player. I can barely play the keyboard, but I know how to play some chords and stuff like that. But the reason, I just don't practice it. But I'll take the bass notes. That's a C. Then I play an A flat. So that's three chords there that I can, it already has a different vibe to me. Instead of just right, you gotta have this. Right, it's to me it's more intriguing and kind of has more movement, of course. So what I do from then on, I have a bass note that works really well against the melody. And the way I figure that out, I kind of just, I know the arrangement, so I went to that. But when I first started doing this, I just literally just kind of started playing whatever note on the left hand that my ear kind of wanted to take me to. But I settled for that. And what I did is that I just found out what chords work with those. So if I'm playing a C on the bass, I can use my C minor chord, which is the original. That's how I started. And then the next chord would be an A flat major 7, which actually works with the G and the C. And then the next one would be a G minor 7, or G minor 9 if you want to include the melody. So you have kind of three chords there. The 7 there. So that already kind of gives you a completely different vibe for a song that already started, and I did not touch the melody at all. So the melody is what it is. It already exists, and it is the way it is, and I'm not changing anything dramatically around the melody. I'm changing the context in which the melody is presented, which is really, really important to understand. So okay, so that's harmony. That's something you could do with a harmony. I'll play a quick example of something similar that I did, and actually fairly similar chords, I guess, to a certain extent. Same key. I did an arrangement of She's Like the Wind, which happens to be a song from Dirty Dancing, written by Patrick Swayze. So again,
Woohoo! Nice work, Alejandro.
Thank you. I like taking all of these songs that don't fit within the jazz repertoire and make them fit somehow. And harmony is a great way to do that, because we can get away with a lot more thicker harmony within this. So here's a short thing. I'll play a little bit of it. It has a little bit of the bass intro. I played this on a 6-string bass, and the piano plays the melody. So that's kind of how the melody is harmonized. Now, I don't want to play the original song because you guys may get sued for putting it at, I don't know. So I don't know. But in any case, if you feel like watching Dirty Dancing, you can go back and listen to it, or just look it up on any streaming media. But in any case, She's Like the Wind was this song. We were doing an 80s show and we were looking for ideas, and this was just kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. I'm like, oh, this it's a cool song. It's a nice melody, very nice melody. And I just said, so there's two elements to this arrangement. One of them is that the bass is really kind of doing what the piano would usually do. So I'm playing some arpeggios and I'm playing bass notes at the same time. Whereas the piano, when it comes in, is just playing single note lines, like, like a horn would do or something like that. And then eventually the bass kind of starts playing its own role, just playing bass notes, and the piano starts playing the chords. So that element of the arrangement is already kind of different from what you would usually hear, because you have a different timbre that the bass is producing. And the roles are not reversed, but it's a little different thing, and it gives you somewhere to go, especially when you're arranging for a small group. It's okay to play with less information and then increase it. So, but I talk about contrast. If you play less, it'll give you a chance to get to play more. So when you play your notes that are when you play more notes, it's going to be more meaningful or more noticeable, if you will. But if you stand from the beginning just playing all of these notes, then the listener may lose track of or may lose the attention of the listener. In any case, so another thing that I did, I reharmonized that. Again, it's another song in, I think the original is in C minor, but same thing at the beginning. That little line that I did on the bass usually only has a couple, it's just two chords, I think. I don't remember what how to play it. Sorry, I suck at keyboard. Yeah, that little line, it's just that line over one chord, and then another chord after a little bit, but it's only two chords. And I play, I think that intro I play like maybe 8 different chords. Now the point of that, is to create some bass movement. I don't want the listener to get my goal is to the listener to still understand that as an accessible song, to not be so obscured by crazy harmony that they are like, what is this song, or anything like that, because you can also use harmony to obscure the melody very dramatically. So you got to be careful with that, in my opinion. Again, you can do whatever you want with your arrangements. That's the listener decides if they want to listen to it or not. But I like to keep it, still have a clean melody, but make it interesting. Another thing that you can change is the meter. So meaning if you take something that's in 4/4 and put it in 3/4 or 5/4 or a bunch of different ways. I'll use another example. So there's a song called I'm So Tired by the Beatles. Again, these are all like pop songs. And the original has a 12/8 feel. It has this boom, boom, I'm so tired. Dun, da, 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 da. That's the original. Ba, ba. All right, so now I did an arrangement of this in 3 and then goes to 4. I'll play a little bit of it. Bass intro surprise. And this is with a great singer that we recorded named June.
I'm so tired, I haven't slept a
So in
wink.
3.
I'm so tired, my mind is on the ring. I wonder, should I get up and fix myself a drink?
Then it goes back to 3.
I'm so tired, I don't know what to do. I'm so tired, my on you. I wonder, should I call you? But I know what you would do. You'd say, I'm putting you on.
Which is more similar to the original.
It's doing me harm, you know I can't sleep. I can't stop my brain, you know it's 3 weeks and I'm going insane. No, I'd give you everything I've got, the little piece of mine.
So that's the bulk of the song. So I just kind of had this idea of this bass line. A lot of my arrangements will start with the bass line sometimes, just like a little riff that I can build up on. I can build stuff on. So this one, I think it just starts with bass and vocals, kind of creating almost like a contrapuntal thing. And again, I'm playing with the idea of playing with a triple meter going into 4/4. You know, and the idea when we do that as a group, what we try to do, and as an arranger, I try to write it in a way that it's seamless. That you don't realize that something's funky and weird and anything like that. You can still listen to it and be a pleasurable experience for you as a listener. That you don't have to understand music theory in order to understand the arrangement. So that sticks pretty similar with the melody as far as what, you know, the phrasing of what June was doing. That, you know, she has her own phrasing, but she sticks pretty close to what it is. Now I'm gonna play you another example here of doing something different with the melody. I mentioned how you can change the melody in different ways. So this next one I'm going to play is Lullaby of the Leaves. Again, you know, if you want to kind of hear, if you're not familiar with some of these songs, this is a jazz standard. And if you're not familiar with some of these songs, I encourage you to kind of go back, if you're watching this as a recorded session, go back and listen to the original and kind of listen to these arrangements I'm going to play so you get an idea of what it is that I'm doing. I'll try to explain it, but it makes more sense if you know what the original sounds like. So Lullaby of the Leaves, what I did, this is actually an arrangement that kind of just, I wanted to do something to feature our drummer, Mark. And originally this was like a fast swing thing, and it just kind of evolved into this Latin salsa type of vibe. And what it is that I take the melody and all the notes of the melody are there, but the way the melody is phrased in rhythm is very different. So the melody of this usually is ba 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 da da ba 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 da ba da ba da ba da ba ba, loosely something like that. And this is kind of what we did with it. So what you're going to hear is a phrase of the melody, then like a drum, like a space for the drums, then another phrase of the melody, space for the drums, and then we get to the bridge, and same thing kind of happens. So here it is. So up to there, one of the things that I did was I played like a short version of the melody and then a long version. So I did like a ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-da. That's kind of the short one. So it's all kind of syncopated stuff, syncopated rhythm and all quick. And then the response to that is long. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-da. Right, and then the second A, which is the melody, is exactly the same. I do the opposite. I do a long version and short version. So I do ba 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 da, and then ba da ba 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 da ba 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 da 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 da, etc. Now the bridge on this song is actually just at the rate. So if you're playing and the bridge would be, something like that. So what I did, I took the melody at halftime on the bridge, which is going to start playing here. With a cha-cha feel. So, and the very last section of it, what I did is I did the 2 short versions, so of that melody. So each A section, you know, this is an AABA form, which means you have melody A, second A repeats, then there's a bridge, which is the B section, and then there's a last A, which is just like the first 2 A sections. I think it's, I don't remember if it's identical, but usually a lot of these standards will have an AABA form, maybe like an AABA prime with like a little different ending. But for the sake of clarity, AABA, so, and the last one, so each A in this version is different. Which was kind of hard to memorize because there were, you know, once you think you got it, you the next one you don't have it. So, but it's a lot of fun to play, and you know, that's one way that you can change a song without changing the pitch of the melody, but you're changing the way you phrase it. So that was kind of a mixture between elongating the melody on the bridge, which I'm playing at halftime, if you will. And I don't think the whole thing was halftime. It was just the pa 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 pa. Usually it's pa da da. So, and I didn't do a lot of reharmonizing in this. If you notice, basically it's being played in unison. That's another element of that arrangement, that we are playing it. All the instruments are playing the melody. This features Chuck Red on vibe. So he's playing the melody, I'm playing the melody on bass, John is playing the melody on piano, and Mark is kind of playing around the melody, but he's actually catching all the stuff that we play together. So there's really no harmony in that, there's no chords. And actually this became, I'll play what happens exactly where I stopped the recording, which is this. That goes into Lullaby of Birdland, which is a completely unrelated song other than the title is Lullaby, as well as, you know, Lullaby of the Leaves into Lullaby of Birdland. I don't remember how that ended up happening. That was just a group decision that we made at some point. So there's a way, you know, that's just one thing that we did with that. So, you know, just by focusing in, oh, and of course the feel, you know, the original on this is, actually, some of these old standards, I don't know the exact feel of the very first recording of this, but it's usually played as in a swing feel. Lullaby of Birdland was definitely a swing feel, you know, so we just changed it into like a salsa or Latin groove, and that already, you know, that kind of makes it our own. So since this is kind of the only standard I have talked about so far, one way to reimagine standards is the same way, like what I said, you know, about the melody, the harmony, the meter, you know, but also kind of looking at if you are adapting it to a specific style. For example, sometimes we like to play like a funk version of a standard. Now, what happens sometimes when you change the feel is that certain chord progressions sit better in certain feels. So funk tends to have less chords than a jazz standard. So a good way to kind of find that is find like common pedal points or stick to the dominance. Like when you have a 2-5-1, kind of just on the bass, just kind of stick to the dominant and make it more, because a lot of funk tends to be kind of static. And I personally feel sometimes I kind of feel, that it sounds better when you kind of emulate a little bit of the feel of the harmony of a funk tune than just take a straight idea of, okay, this song has a bunch of 2/5s. Let's just change the feel and still stick to the same chord progression. I always feel like it works better when you can get into that. Now, what happens a lot of times in jazz is that you'll be at a gig and you just look at each other. You're like, hey, let's try this song in this style. So that's, when you have a group that works together often, you can have a lot of things that happen that way. Like La Lucha, we get to work together a lot. So I'm going to play you a quick thing here. This is a standard called Have You Met Miss Jones? And this arrangement kind of came together when we were at a gig and we called the tune. And I remember I said, like, hey, let me set it up. I'm going to play like a funky bass line. And this is the arrangement almost came entirely this way on the bandstand. Obviously, very sloppy at that point because we hadn't agreed on stuff. We were just kind of doing things. But this is kind of the end result of what this happened with this. So, Have You Met Miss Jones? So that, I would say the bridge on this, we took a lot of liberties with the melody on this one, and again, sometimes you get away with that if it's a song that's really, really well known, has been heard a million times. You can take those liberties and kind of really, I wouldn't say destroy it, but really reconstruct the melody in a way that fits what it is that you're doing, So, and again, this was kind of an arrangement that we just kind of came up on the spot. So a cool thing that happened here on the fly was that I started playing the bass line and John, our pianist, just kind of started, I'm just playing roots. So he decided to harmonize those roots however he wanted on the piano. So it creates a cool kind of chord progression at the beginning. When I started playing the bass line, I wasn't thinking of a specific chord progression. I just kind of heard it almost like a melody. So the last thing I want to show you here, it's actually one of my oldest arrangements. And this one I worked on this one quite a bit. And I took some elements that were back to a pop song, and actually this is a Britney Spears song, and it's called Toxic. And one cool thing with this that I always fascinated me about this song, the melody is really cool, but it always had like this string sample that I found out later that it was actually sampled from I think it was a Bollywood movie. So it has these strings that are part of the riff of the song. Now, the entire song, that's what happens. There's one spot in the entire song, on the original I'm talking about, that the strings go up. And that was always my favorite part of the song. It was my favorite riff because it only happened once. And it's like, oh, that catchy moment that you're like, oh, waiting for that moment in the song. Now, this song for years, it was like a guilty pleasure for me. I couldn't talk to other jazz musicians about it until I found Mark and John, and I said, like, hey, this song is awesome. They're like, we agree. And then I went and arranged it. So what I did is I took that string part that goes up, and I created this bass line with it. Now the melody is actually all there. It's a weird, it's in a weird, it's phrased a little bit weird. I elongated it. But we're playing like a double time swing feel over this. And the funny thing is that when we played this live, some people would look at us and be like, oh, this sounds familiar, but we don't know where it is if we didn't announce it, you know. And then we would get to kind of the chorus, and we go into halftime. It's more similar to the original, and people would immediately go like, that's what that is, you know. So I'll play a little bit of it, and I'll talk a second about it. So here it goes, Toxic. That bass line is based on that string thing that I was talking about. Anyways, then we go into solos and we laugh, we cry, we knit a sweater. But in any case, that was one of the long. I think I did that arrangement maybe, you know, almost 15 years ago, and I had a lot of fun with that because it was really kind of an exercise for me to see how I could deconstruct a song and then put it back together in a different way. So what I did with the melody is, you know, I took I simplified it a little bit of it. It's there. The melody is there, and I obviously harmonized it with kind of some power chords, more closely related to metal than jazz in a sense, which is part of my background anyway. So. Yeah, I just wanted to do like you know, the title of the song is Toxic, so I wanted to do something that kind of showed that. But that was you know, basically just where I kind of really looked at the possibilities that especially because a lot of people like the arrangement. So I was like, oh, this actually works. So, which was good. And that's kind of why I'm talking about arranging from my perspective. I'm not dissecting other people's arrangements because I would love to do that, but I can only talk about my creative process because I know where all of this stuff came from and how I approach it. Again, that's just one point of view, and I wanted to kind of share with you guys all those things that work. So, you know, always think of an arrangement, you know, thinking about changing the groove or the feel, changing the meter, you know, which affects the groove or the feel as well. You know, you can do some odd time signatures are really cool to play with. I won't play that, but I did an arrangement of a song, Take Me On by Aha. And it's in 5, and I just had this realization that the singer actually phrases the melody in 5 with a rest at the end. So it's this kind of cool thing, but if you want to check it out, it's on, you know, you can find it on Spotify. We recorded it on an album. But I digress. So changing the meter, so you can play with that idea. Changing the harmony, of course, which is the first thing I talked about. Again, that kind of change. All of these things really change the context in which an existing melody is presented, which is kind of what arrangement is in a way. You know, you're making it your own. You're reinterpreting the melody in your own way, or the song in your own way, and playing. You know, one piece of advice I would give somebody that's arranging a song for a singer. for years, I really approached it the same way as I would arrange for an instrumentalist, which a lot of the times I would give them a very specific phrasing, but singers are emoting lyrics as well. So sometimes they like to phrase things a little bit differently. So I started realizing that it would be better for me to arrange in a way that I would be able to give that liberty to singers to phrase their own way, to make the song their own from the lyrical aspect, because I'm not playing lyrics, I'm just playing a bass line or arrange the tune, but I am not the one in front of the band, emoting these lyrics. So that's something to keep in mind when you're arranging with a singer in mind, especially as an instrumentalist, that sometimes, I know I tend to ignore lyrics a lot of the times because I just get distracted by bass lines most of the time. But yeah, that's something to keep in mind. And same thing for instrumentalists, keep in mind how the limitations of a given instrument. If you're having a bass play a melody, put it in a way, in a place of the range of the instrument that it actually is. Can make it sound to the best of the abilities of the melody of what the melody sounds and the instrument, because if you put it too low, it may get lost in the with all of the band. If it gets too high, it may not quite have as rich of a sound. So those are things to consider, when you're creating arrangements. So I think that's all I got for today. I could, as always, I could talk for hours, but I think this is plenty of information to investigate.
Yeah, so cool, Alejandro. What a great topic. And I have a couple questions. I love covers of music, and I always have. There's something that is exciting to me and really appealing about hearing songs I love interpreted differently. Of course, then there are some of those songs that or artists where I don't want to hear anybody else even try to do something to my, that artist for me. Yeah. Now, I would say that's few and far between, but I wonder, does that translate to in jazz as you're looking to reimagine things? Are there certain things that you also wouldn't touch? Is it as exciting to you to listen to different interpretations of music?
Absolutely. I love listening to different interpretations. And, one thing as a musician that I wish I didn't have was to be able to turn off the switch of hearing music as a musician and just be able to hear the music as a lay person, because I would be able to, you have a critical ear when you become a musician. You, like I say, you tend to gravitate maybe towards certain instruments and stuff like that. So sometimes I wish I could just turn that switch off and be like, oh, I just want to enjoy this song for what it is. But it has been a concerted effort of my part to be able to, like I said, kind of like some music that would be considered, it's not exactly what you said, but there's some of the pop music that I just presented. Some guys would, scoff at it and say, like, are you kidding? Is this a joke? This is not real music. Some people would say that, but I disagree. I think if somebody is moved by some piece of music, it has the same value regardless of where it comes from. And that's kind of what I tend to come from. So yes, there's certain songs that I've loved that I've tried to arrange, and I'm like, man, this is not even close. I mean, the original is so perfect that I really can't do anything with it. Or I find myself having to change it so much that I'm like, might as well just do my own composition based on this, So yeah, there's certain songs that I've tried to kind of do something with. And yeah, they're just performances too. Something to think about too is that sometimes it's just what the performer created at that specific moment that was just so special. I was using this example recently with somebody I was talking to about arrangements and some re-recorded versions by the same artist. There's been a lot of, especially some of the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. There were some record deals that some artists just kind of basically they had no control over the music whatsoever after they recorded it. So sometimes in order to kind of have their own version out there, sometimes the record label won't release it when we release something in any case. So there's a few kind of like one-hit wonders that have re-recorded their songs, and it's the same people playing it, but it just doesn't sound the same. And there's just something to be said for a specific performance that's been captured in time, in the studio, you know, or live or wherever it is. And sometimes that's just, you know, to borrow a term from that's used in sports a lot. It's the intangibles, you know, where it's just like, okay, yeah, you're playing all the right notes, you're playing this, but it's just not quite there. It's just not. You know, sometimes even the mistakes that are made on some of those older recordings before, you know, the studios made everything perfect, just those mistakes is exactly what makes it, you know, gives a song a specific charm. And yes, so yeah, to answer your question, you know, yeah, there's some stuff that I wouldn't touch, but there's other stuff that I love to hear those songs through the filter of somebody else, you know, of somebody else's mind or ear, you know.
Yeah, you know, the psychology of it's really interesting to me. I feel like we could do some sessions just on, you know, the appeal of reimagining and covering music, and I don't know. It's just there are songs that, you know, we all have a connection with at some point in time. And then you don't at another point in time, but then if you hear it in a new way, it immediately becomes fresh again and different and something for you in this point in time, right? And so that's happened to me, where I found songs that I've completely lost touch with, and I find myself listening to the cover or a reimagined track and just and enjoying it immensely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that just shows that beautiful thing of how everybody perceives things differently. You know, I've always found it kind of funny when there's artists that complain about, you know, audiences interpreting their songs in a certain way. They're like, oh, that's not what the song is about. Like, well, I mean, unfortunately, once you put something out there, anybody can interpret it in any way, you know, and so that's the beauty of it, you know, that everybody gets to, you know, whether it's a great thing you said there, Steve, because I've had that experience too, where I've lost touch with a song specifically, and then I hear it again and hear it in a different way, and it kind of makes me either appreciate the original more or just view it in a different way, or sometimes even look at how much deeper the song was than I originally intended, because sometimes certain arrangements, you know, original arrangements can take a song because they were like the hip thing at the time to do, and they can take a song, just something as simple as the drum sound can change the meaning of a song, you know, to a certain extent, because it may put it in this box of how we understand or where we understand that music to live, you know. One of my favorite songs is Everybody Wants to Rule the World, because it has this weird combination of, you know, you hear the production is like completely 80s. It's like the quintessential 80s song, but it just still sounds really fresh. You know, like there's something about it that's just like, and I can't tell you what it is. You know, that's just kind of how I feel about it. And I've been listening to that song since it came out, you know. It's always kind of there floating in the air. So yeah, it's a very interesting thing, the psychology of music and how we perceive things.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great, and I certainly have enjoyed listening to your interpretation of the songs that you've recorded. It's been really cool, and I find myself now when I hear songs from, you know, my playlists and things from the past, now I'm starting to think of, is La Lucha also listening to this, and what would they do? Maybe this is the next one, so I might have to start texting you every time I have one of those feelings.
Please do.
No, I would never do that, but I just think it's really neat. It's very fresh, and I've enjoyed it immensely. So thank you, Alejandro, for being part again of these series. I encourage everybody to go check out the studio resource and watch or listen to all of these archive sessions, or check out the podcast. And I look forward to having you back, hopefully, Alejandro, with some other topics, and twist your arm to continue to be involved, because I know that our community of support and the students really appreciate having you involved.
Oh, thank you, Steve. I definitely will stay involved. I love doing this, so thank you so much for having me.
Very cool. All right, everybody, on behalf of the Clearwater Jazz Holiday Foundation, thank you for participating. Stay safe out there, be well, and keep playing. We'll see you soon.